Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. I say this every week, but this week, I mean, we are in for a treat. We don't have one, we don't have two, we have three guests with us, and they are the founders, the Invisible Warriors. I'm going to just show you a clip because I think that kind of like sums up why it is that we're here and why it is so important that we have this discussion. So I'm going to just show you a little clip and then introduce you to these three wonderful ladies, Louisa, Linda and Christina. And they're just part of the team for the Invisible Warriors. But let me just share this clip with you, which is Louisa's story, or part of Louisa's story.
I remember spending most of my childhood in the children's ward, which in my mind was just my second home. My episodes could be for 2 to 6 weeks, which affected my academic journey and friendships. So I say I had friends, but I always felt I just got forgotten about, as I was absent a lot. I remember friends' parents asking, can their child catch it? My mum never heard of this disease, which is quite funny, as it affects Black people, but a large number of Black people don't know about sickle cell, believe it or not. When teenage years hit, after a childhood of trauma, I rebelled by drinking, smoking, which didn't help my condition. My whole world changed when I found out I was pregnant at 18 years old. The GP and everyone advised me not to continue with the pregnancy and even caused my mum to stop talking to me out of fear. I was informed that I had to have an elected cesarean, as they feared a natural childbirth could trigger a crisis.
I'm going to stop the video there and just welcome our guests once again, which are Louisa, Linda and Christina. As you can tell, I'm not saying the main person, but the story which we're looking at here is related to Louisa. And then we're going to bring in, I'm going to stop there. Louisa, you're the special guest, but we do have two other guests, which are special as well, but in a different way. And I don't want to do, so I'm going to ask Linda and Christina, if you just introduce yourself, and then we'll focus a little bit more on you, Louisa, if that's okay. So Linda, I'm going to start with you, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Linda. I work at Imperial College at the Faculty of Medicine. And 2 years ago, I was a teaching fellow, also involved in the hematology teaching. And that's where I met Louisa, but she'll explain more about that. Fantastic. Thanks, Wayne.
And Christina, we've met before.
We have, yes. Nice to be here again. It's always great hour. So my name is Christina. I'm a haematology registrar at Hammersmith Hospital, and I'm a research fellow at Imperial College London doing my PhD at the moment. I look after patients with sickle cell disease, and that's how I have got involved with the project.
Fantastic. And Louisa, Linda's already alluded to it, that can you give us a bit about your story, your sense of belonging, your sense of who you are? And we saw from the little clip which we just showed about having sickle cell, but can you just explain it to us, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I'm Louisa. So hi everyone. And I'm a Sickle Cell Warrior SS. And I'm 45 years old and I have a 25-year-old daughter now. So yeah, I have sickle cell and I'm under the care of Imperial at Hammersmith Hospital, the haematology department. And basically I
work is it?
I was asked by
Imperial.
Jeremy, my therapist, to speak with medical students and to talk about having sickle cell disease, but not just the effects of pain and my experiences in hospital, but like, you know, outside of that, like my day-to-day, and then also the effect that it had on my mental health, which when I was a lot younger, I was not really aware of. And this was during lockdown. So as you can imagine, I had so much time on my hands. So when Jeremy asked me, I was a bit scared at first, but I thought, you know what, I'll take on the challenge. And I wrote literally my story from birth till now. And I went into great detail, very open and transparent, because it was actually quite therapeutic for me to do that. And that's when I actually spoke with the medical students, read out my story, and then Linda contacted me. I was actually quite blown away and shocked, because you think, oh, you know, it's just my little story, but yeah, like people's cameras were turning off and I was like, oh God, they think I'm really boring, and oh my gosh. And then it turns out at the end that everyone was actually in tears. So for me, it was humbling, but it was also very inspiring, as just for myself, as like, well, you know, I didn't realize when you actually read through your story what you actually go through having sickle cell, and just being so open and honest about it and getting a good response was absolutely amazing. But that is how Invisible Warrior actually started, with me and Linda sort of going back and forth and saying, you know, I think more people should know like what sickle cell patients actually go through, and it's not just about the pain. It's about the fact that, you know, like I just said, I'm a mum, you know, and I was a single mum. My career, having the struggles of like I said, being told, you know, maybe you should quit because it's so unpredictable, and just trying to juggle the fact that I have an illness, but I look very well. Like a lot of people be like, oh, you look amazing, but sometimes there's so much happening behind that.
Wait, I'm going to just say something here, and I don't want to be rude, but when you said your age, I said, no way, girl, you're looking good. Right?
It's all the water.
Right. So, yeah, and that's the thing. The sickle cell can appear invisible. It is invisible. No one can tell. If we're walking down the street, no one would tell any different.
Yeah.
And so that in itself can be quite, tell me how that is, because how do people respond?
Oh, I could tell you so many stories. Like, for instance, I've got a blue badge, which I finally got. I didn't always have it. I've got a vascular necrosis of the hip, so I'm in a lot of pain. I can park my car in a disabled bay and I get people literally screaming at me saying, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, why have you got that badge? You probably stole it. So that is so hard, because, you know, sometimes you want to prove, like, I've got my picture on it, but then I shouldn't have to do that because I have a blue badge. I have an illness. Also, claiming disability was the most hardest journey. I didn't actually receive it until my probably early 30s. So throughout my whole childhood, teenage years, they kept refusing to give me a disability, even the fact that I couldn't work a lot of the time. So that was really difficult. And yeah, I mean, I can also, you know, like I could go to work, I'm fine, and then all of a sudden the pain hits, and then I'll be like, I have to go, or, you know, I've been out with friends and then they have to call an ambulance. But people sort of look at you like, well, you was just fine a minute ago, laughing and joking, but the pain just literally switches on, and then that's it. It's a whole different ball game.
So let me ask a quick question, just so that we can kind of like get an understanding of when you say that pain just hits. Are there any triggers which you know, I can't do this because it's going to trigger it? Because when you were in the little clip which we showed, they said you can't go through a natural childbirth because they think it would trigger a crisis. Are there any other cues which throughout living with this disorder you've been able to say, actually, probably better stay away from doing that?
Yeah, so I know for sure, like, there's certain foods that trigger it for me personally. Like, I can't eat tomatoes, fried foods. I actually became vegan because I felt like my diet was actually triggering. I'd find if I ate a lot of, like meat, fried foods, I'd end up in crisis. Obviously alcohol, which in my teenage years, I was like just trying to block it out and trying to be normal like everybody else. And that was, I'd go raving and have to get an ambulance outside the club, like quite embarrassing. But yeah, I went through that quite a bit. Stress, I know that sounds, we all have stress, but for me, it's such a trigger. And also going to the gym, I can't do vigorous exercise because it's like, as soon as I go to the gym, I've tried because, I want to look good, but I'd end up in crisis. So I just learned that I can do like light exercise, like yoga, Pilates, but not like vigorous exercise. Also, like, if you go on holiday and you might get on a small little plane to go to an island, no, I can't do that, the oxygen. And even flying, like I flew to Jamaica in 2018, and on that flight I actually went into crisis. So that was really scary for me because it was very painful. I didn't want to tell the people I was with, and then like when I landed, I was in a lot of pain. So there's a few things that it is quite difficult and are triggers to me personally, because I believe everyone else is different, but I do think there's certain key things that we can't do as such. And cold weather and damp, if you get cold, if it's raining, like I actually check the weather because I'm like, oh my god, it's going to rain. My anxiety goes up because normally can trigger a crisis also.
In the video as well, it also said that especially when you were younger, the crises could last from like 2 to 6 weeks. Is that still the case now, or are you able to manage it better now?
I think as I've got older, and I've sort of taken more responsibility of my own care, I have episodes, but they could last like maybe a week, 2. But if I get an infection, like it's so out of my control. Once I go into hospital, and then the infection might get worse, or I've been in hospital, I think my last time I was in was probably like 2.5 weeks, but then when you come home you're still trying to recover, so in total about 3-4 weeks. But as I've got older, they're not as bad as such, and I do think that is because, I don't know, for me, I find hospital experience quite traumatizing. So I've learned how to sort of manage them at home a bit better. And I think it's more calming for me because I find, you don't get a lot of sleep. The food is terrible. So, and I'm a bit of a foodie. So I think I've just learned how to sort of balance the fact that if I'm at home, okay, I can eat kind of well. I'm more relaxed and calm in my room. So we've got like a bit of a protocol at home, me and my daughter, so to help me get through them. But I mean, obviously, if it's in my chest area and all the pain's really bad, I have to go in. But it's not been as bad as when I was a lot younger.
So the title of the show is Belonging, right? And so my question is throughout this, within your family, within your friendship groups, how did you feel that how did it make you feel? Did you feel like you belonged? Did you feel like an outsider? What was it? How did that affect you?
When I was younger, I was quite ashamed of having sickle cell. I think because it was an illness that just affected Black people, it seemed really isolating to explain to people. And I grew up in an area called Northolt, which is predominantly white. So it was very awkward to state, oh, I have this thing called sickle cell. So I never really used to share that. And I'd feel different anyway, because I knew at any given moment I can go into pain, I can go into hospital. Even the fact trying to say, oh, I've got this infection, it just seems like, oh, you're a person that's always sick, you know. And then within my family, I felt very isolated because everyone sort of tiptoed around and, you know, very sheltered. So I felt very, although it's a beautiful thing, you know, to have people care about you enough to do that, but at the same time, it was quite hard because, you know, like for instance, we'd all be at my uncle's house on the weekend and all the cousins are playing outside. But if it was a bit cold or damp, I wasn't really allowed to, or I had to have like 1,000 layers. So I looked really odd. You know, my cousins would tease me and stuff like that. Or they'd be like, oh, you're the favourite, because, you know, all my uncles and aunts and older cousins would be like, you know, make sure, be careful with Louisa, or have you drank some water, Louisa, come in, have some more water. Are you warm enough? And we've got to put the heating on and everyone's sweating, but, you know, the heat has got to be on. So, yeah, you feel a bit of a burden to the people around you. And even like my mum spent all her life like looking after me, and sometimes sadly, like looking back, you know, she didn't really have a life because it must be so difficult. You know, she's always on edge, she's always got to be close by. I didn't go on holidays. Like my sister got sent to Grenada and I was so jealous because I'm like, you know, how come she gets to go and I can't? But, you know, when I was younger, I didn't really understand why my mum wouldn't let me. But obviously being a mum myself and older, I understand. She was just scared, you know, we don't know whether I'd get great care and everyone would be able to give me the care I needed. So yeah, there was lots of moments in my life where I felt like, oh, I'm being left out, especially at school. School was hard. I had a few friends that knew I was sick, you know, they would visit me in hospital, you know, bring the work. But ultimately, you know, when you go back after being away for like 6 weeks, you know, different friendship groups are formed and there's a game that everyone plays and I haven't got a clue what the game is. So I'm sort of like looking like, oh, what's happening? What's this? Some new game. So yeah, I felt a bit isolated, left out. And to be honest, I never really spoke about it. So I think I didn't really have an outlet to express that I was feeling like that when I was a lot younger. And that's why therapy for me is so important, because there was so much stuff I didn't really handle when I was young. And everyone just wanted to make sure I was well physically in my body, but I don't think my mind was doing so well.
So there, I like that. I like that comparison which you've just given, to say that although it's almost like two hidden illnesses. There was the sickle cell which you could cope with because layers, don't do this, don't do that. But there was also the mental effect with having to be restrained, having to be taken out of the situation. So therefore you, although the physical was being treated, the mental effects, people weren't recognizing that at all. So
Yeah.
when did you start going into therapy, as it were? I'm not, and I want to caveat that as to say that it's not a bad thing, because some people, when you think, oh, they're in therapy, they think, well, there's something wrong, but there is. But if you explain how it worked for you.
Yeah, so I had a coping mechanism. So I'd go into hospital, I'd come out and I would try and jump straight back into my life. Even when there was times when I probably shouldn't have, but I would do it because I think it was a form of controlling my life. So I would try and act extremely normal, jump straight back in. I had a routine. I'd get my hair washed and done, get my nails done, get my eyebrows done, and just to look and feel like I'm okay, I'm back. And I think that went up until my mid-20s. And a little bit before that, that's when me and my daughter's dad split. So I don't think I even dealt with that, because that was very scary, because obviously he was home with us. So when we decided that, you know, we couldn't live together, I realized, oh my God, I'm going to be on my own, you know, doing this. And what if I go into crisis? So that was really stressful. And I had a really bad episode around that time, went into hospital. I think I was in there for like 3.5 weeks. I came out, I got in my bed and I just couldn't get out. I was like, I can't do this no more. Something's not right. And I didn't know, I thought it was, this one's taken a lot longer for me to get over. And I think I remember saying to one of my friends, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, I just, if this is what my life is, I don't want to do it. And like, she was like really worried. And she's like, Louisa, I think you need to speak to somebody. And I was like, oh no, who do I speak to? And I remember being really emotional, couldn't stop crying, didn't want to get up, didn't want to get my hair done, didn't want to jump back into life. And I rang my GP and I said, look, something's not right. I'm not coping very well. And at the time I had an amazing GP, and he was like, Louisa, do you think you need to speak to somebody? You know, and I said, yeah, I think I do. I can't cope anymore. It's too much. So they referred me to a counsellor, but you only get 6 sessions, you know, via NHS. And I remember like my first couple of sessions, at first I felt really uncomfortable. And I was sort of skipping around, you know. Obviously I was talking about, you know, like my own personal stuff, like I grew up without my father. So I just thought these are the things, you know, like I've got daddy issues, and, you know, I've got a breakdown of a relationship, I'm a single mum. But ultimately throughout the sessions as well, what would come up would be the fact that, you know, I get pain and I'm really scared. Like there's times when I remember saying to her, I think I might die, you know, what's going to happen to my daughter? And I'm so young. And she was like, you know, I think I was coming up to my last sessions, and she's like, I don't want to just stop, you know, I think we need to extend. And around that time as well, I went to Hammersmith, because I used to be under a different hospital, Ealing. And I met Dr. Layton and the team, and you know, I explained that I was having therapy, but they were coming to an end. And they were like, no, we've got a therapist here. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, you know, do you want to meet with her? So I said, yeah. And one of the best things I ever done, because I realized having sickle cell is so traumatic. And for years, I just bottled up the silent, private thoughts about having sickle cell, i.e. the pain. Like when your body goes through so much pain and you can't do anything about it, it's so scary. And I'm a bit emotional, so I'm a bit of a crier, so I'm getting a bit teared up. Thinking you're going to die, you know, I didn't even think I was going to reach 20. I think when I was a lot younger, I just assumed by the time I'm 20, I'm going to die, because that's what I got sort of told. Like, you know, sickle cell patients don't live past that. And that's why I even kept my daughter, because I don't know, it just felt like an achievement. Like I must be able to do this. And you know, God gave me her. Silent battle of thinking you're going to die, not having control over your own life, because it does feel like that. It feels like you don't have any control. Like I can plan a holiday in February, but who knows if I'm able to even go on holiday. And after a while of living like that, it does something to you. It's quite soul destroying. So therapy really helped me to understand that. And I was quite angry. I was very short-tempered in my 20s, very argumentative. And I think it wasn't because that's who I am. I think it was a coping mechanism, and any reason to express anger, which wasn't nice, wasn't healthy. So therapy really helped me to understand, you know, I've got PTSD. I experience chronic pain. And it is okay to be really mad at that. But however, being able to express it correctly is very important. And I think that's what therapy done for me. It helped me to understand that it was okay to be kind of mad at my situation. And I don't want to be a victim. I'm not a victim. But again, sometimes even the fact that you say I'm a warrior, you know, sometimes warriors get really tired, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I was really tired in my 20s, like really tired.
Yeah. Louise, listen, yours is such a powerful story. Such a powerful story. When you said you didn't think that you would live beyond 20, because that's what everybody's being told. And yet now you have a daughter who's 25. That's a miracle in itself, you know, and you're looking so well. But I know that underneath there is still the almost like the enemy within. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to just pull it in Christina and Linda so that we can kind of like balance out what it is, how the invisible, you spoke about the warrior, how the invisible warrior came about. So if I pull in Linda and Christina and just let's just pull them into the conversation as well. Okay. So Linda and Christina, where's Louisa? So I'm just trying to, I'm putting everybody on spotlight now, right? So how did the invisible warriors come about? We've got our warrior, but how is it what is it that the invisible warrior does, and what is it that you want to achieve going forward?
Yeah, I think still Louisa could explain best, but I can explain a bit from my side. So like Louisa mentioned 2 years ago, almost like on the day now, Louisa shared her story to medical students, and like she explained, everyone turned their camera off, including me, because I was crying so much. So it was kind of an extended version of the video we have. It was 18 minutes and so powerful. So as Louisa said, I reached out to her. Like I thought, like I have a cell biology background. I only knew from sickle cell on the DNA level, so like what it means there, but I never realized what it means for a person. And I felt so ignorant hearing Louisa's story. It's like, how didn't I know? And if someone who even has a biomedical background doesn't have a clue, that means that so many people don't have a clue. So I reached out to Louisa and said, well, first I just told her that it was amazing, and I was just really like touched. But I also said that if she wanted to reach more people, I would like to help her. So I think that was the first step.
Fantastic. So Christina, give us a little perspective from how you became involved with the Invisible Warrior.
Yeah, so obviously I have a very sort of different perspective of sickle cell, largely because I look after patients with sickle cell and have done for some time now. And you know, I was brought in actually to cover for someone else during some maternity, but have sort of stuck around. And I think that the reality of speaking for the sickle experience, when you have seen it at truly the worst end of the spectrum, which is what we see as clinicians who haven't, you know, have a special interest in sickle cell, or and that's the majority of the workload. If you're a haematologist in London, that is the majority of what you're going to see. May not be the case if you're a haematologist in Cambridge or Oxford, but certainly in London, this is the majority of my day-to-day work would be looking after patients with sickle cell. And I suppose I see it as my responsibility as a doctor to represent my patients, and certainly represent a marginalized group that have for many years been underrepresented by the NHS, by the medical you know, faculty at large, and in society. And the issues there are deep, and they're complex, and they are seated and rooted in race and in you know, inequality. And I think as a haematologist, there should be more of us who see this day to day, who look after patients day to day, to speak up for our patients, because they simply do not have a voice. And I think it's only really been in the last few years that sickle cell has really come to the forefront of some people's thoughts. But healthcare inequality remains very real, and we need to, as the people kind of making the decisions, I suppose, adequately represent all of our patient groups. And in that way, I feel that sickle cell is underrepresented, and I suppose that's really why I'm a part of the team.
Okay, fantastic. Louisa, you're the warrior, but I see all three of you as warriors in different ways in raising awareness. So what are some of the things which you do as a group collectively as the sickle cell warriors?
So we visit schools, and obviously we share my video. We talk about sickle cell, the science behind it. And also another key element is, mental health, and the fact that some people may seem okay, but there's something else happening. And I think that was definitely one of the points that I really wanted to highlight. Also, medical students, I do talk with medical students as well, because I think, it's easier to just sort of look after a patient when we come into A&E and on the ward. The medical side of things is very important. But I think if they have a better understanding of what I've experienced or we've experienced maybe before we've even come in, personalizing the care a little bit better, giving more empathy to the fact that, this is so hard to deal with. I'm not just coming in for painkillers. I don't think going into hospital is like a holiday camp, it's far from it. And I think I just wanted to share my story because I think it's really important that I want to make a change. I want people to understand that sickle cell disease is something we didn't ask to have. And we all have our own personal journey with sickle cell. We all have our own personal lives. So treating us the same under one umbrella isn't fair. It isn't going to cut it. You need to see that before we come into hospital, we have to leave our children or our jobs. We don't know when we're going to be able to return. Like, there's so many factors that are thrown upside down literally before we even enter the hospital. So when we get there, we just want help, we just want support, and we just want to be treated fairly. And I think even the fact that suffering with mental health because of sickle cell, there's maybe many sickle cell patients out there that aren't getting therapy, and I've heard that we've been considered like really angry and aggressive, and there's a reason behind that. We're not just angry, aggressive people. There's a whole backstory to why, I'm feeling rather annoyed. So it's really important for me to share that and open that up for a topic of conversation, because it's a big deal. And if we get help with our mental health, it might help with the amount of episodes we're having, because they correlate in the sense that, stress, anxiety, it can bring on an episode. And I think I just wanted to share and be open about the fact that, I have experienced really bad depression and low mood. And I just want people to be more understanding of what it is like to live with sickle cell. And I think this platform allows us to do that. So yeah.
I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the audience at this point, because I just think other people may have questions. I always have questions, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone else who wants to ask a question at this point. Right, I see quite a few. So I've got Tanwir and then William. So Tanwir, could you ask your question first, please?
Hi, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say hands up to you. You're a double champion, double sort of warrior. In my mind, I was just thinking you're a champion of circumstances, not a victim of circumstances, and double champion because it's sort of what you went through and sort of but then also to and I know it's probably very hard to struggle with the things that you're sort of dealing with the things that you're struggling with, but then also to share your story and making the professional do a better job, just because they obviously it's coming then from understanding from the human behind the cells or the sort of whatever we're working with. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing your story. Incredible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanwin. William.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. Yeah, thank you, Louisa, for really sharing. Yeah, I mean, I know somebody that has sickle cell, and yeah, I think they'll take great encouragement, I think, from hearing your story. So I just wanted to ask more broadly in terms of maybe to all of you, I suppose, in terms of how you feel in relation to, sometimes you read about, you know, potential treatments that are coming downstream and the kinds of hope they offer, but then it feels like as well that there's a lot of neglect and discrimination in the system. So how do you balance the idea of actual hope for treatments, but then the kinds of systematic change that is needed to actually treat patients better? So you know, is there real hope, or all those kinds of things kind of still married up into the kind of inequalities that exist in the healthcare system more broadly?
William, you stole my question, but thank you for saying it so eloquently. Go ahead.
I could take that if you like. I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a really, really great question, and I think it's a real. You know, anybody would be lying if they said that issue doesn't exist, because it definitely doesn't. It does exist. You know, the NHS is built on equality, but I can tell you that that hasn't always extended to the sickle cell community. Now, as you rightly said, William, we are in the last decade have seen a real influx of new treatment in sickle cell. There hasn't been much research directed towards sickle cell for many, many years, and actually there's been a change, and we're seeing you know, you may have heard of crizanlizumab, which has been the newest treatment that's now also available on the NHS, but also we're looking towards bone marrow transplant and gene therapy. Certainly over in St Mary's, we transplant a lot of children before they're 18, and actually it's, you know, you can imagine it's life-changing. You know, to take a child from having a life that's, you know, pain is one element, but the sickle cell affects, as you know, every single organ in your body, and a lot of these patients have probably spent some time on ITU, or as you may have even heard, there's been, you know, lots of death actually in the last year, certainly in sickle cell. So it's not that the spectrum is vast, and a lot of them become very unwell very quickly. So transplant does certainly you know, give us a way out of that. And Imperial certainly has been big in pioneering, you know, gene therapy as a new trial as well. But the problem that we're having to face, I suppose, is that we have a community of patients that have been ill-treated for some time. I'm quite happy to say it like that. And there's a lot of trust that has gone and has been broken down between doctors and patients. And, you know, I'd say we have some patients who have a great amount of trust in us, but certainly others who are probably going to struggle, and that goes outside of just sickle cell. But if we look at historically what has happened, you know, with race and healthcare, and how actually ethnic minority groups have been the groups that a lot of these things have been trialed on against their will, when, you know, historically, and that's what we're seeing the results of, you know, even post-COVID with vaccines and things like that. How do we change those attitudes? How do we allow people to trust us with, you know, new treatments and new therapies, without people feeling that we're maybe trialing them on them, or there's a, you know, a general feeling of lack of trust? I think that is difficult, and that's going to take a lot more time, and I don't know what the direct answer is to that, but we hope at least, you know, I think with sickle cell, you know, you have London centres like Imperial, where actually we have a good relationship with our patients. We've been doing it for a long time, and it's okay. But what happens when you're a sickle cell patient that's in Scotland, or a sickle cell patient that's in Ireland? We see inequality in that way, because actually those doctors don't know how to treat this, and there may not be access to things like crizanlizumab, and certainly there isn't access to things like gene therapy or transplant. So I think that's a very real problem. I know that's not really a problem in London necessarily, and you will have access to those things, but outside of London, that's something that I suppose, you know, NHS England is trying to do a lot for sickle cell at the moment. The government are trying to sort of speak up for sickle cell patients. Do they feel represented there? That's a question for Louisa probably, but I think that's probably not entirely the case. So I think it's complex, and I don't know that that we're doing everything we can yet to target everybody with these new treatments, but we'll have to see how it goes, I suppose.
Fantastic.
Wayne, can I add?
Yeah, please, Linda.
So I'm not a medical doctor, so thank you, Christina, for telling that side. So because of the work we do, I learned a bit about like the other side. So on the level of politics, I think there's very little support to the sickle cell community. Like there is like a small group fighting for it in Parliament, but it's really small. And like over what I've learned over the last years, it's really not recognized. Like they try to get that medication for patients with sickle cell would be free, because it's every chronic condition should have free medication, but it was not passed in Parliament. So on a very high political level, there's very little support. There is a small group trying to push this. Also, there is the same group is trying to push it in the NHS to have more awareness, more training. If like I work in the medical faculty training our students, there's very little sickle cell in the curriculum. So they're trying to change this, but it's a really hard process. And I think on another level, so there is new treatment coming, but if you look at the amount of research and the money for research in sickle cell, it's very, very, very small compared to similar diseases. So there's a lot of different problems.
Wow. Louisa, I'm going to pull you in to get your take on William's question. How, from your point of view, how do you think you've been treated by the NHS and treatment? Have you been offered any other treatments?
I was put on hydroxyurea at the time. I think that was probably the only thing available for me. I found out about you know, wanting to get a bone marrow transplant, but obviously I was a lot older, and by then I had a vascular necrosis, and you know, Dr. Layton just said, you know, Louisa, it would be extremely difficult, you know, when he explained, you know, the process and stuff, and he said, like, I don't know whether your body will be able to handle that. So yeah, I said no. When I actually looked into it properly, I thought, okay, yeah, no, that's definitely not what I want to go through. And the sad part is, I wasn't really aware of any of these things like before. Obviously, I'm 45, so now I think it is a bit more available for people to research and to know what's available. But yeah, in my time, there wasn't much available. It was sort of just, you know, pain relief, make sure we're on antibiotics, folic acid, and those sort of things. And I think touching on, you know, the political side of things, I'm not into politics, so, you know, but it's sad, like, because obviously doing this project, I've been, you know, invited to certain things, and I hear certain things, and Linda, you know, she sends us all like everything. So I read over it, and, you know, there's days where I have like a battle. Like, this started off as like a humble project of my story. However, it's grew into something, you know, I'm so proud and honoured to be able to share my story, to just, if I can educate or inform. But then, you know, when you hear that you can't get your medication for free, or, you know, claiming disability is so hard for sickle cell patients, or the lack of support, like not even having a social worker to help with a lot of things, it's very disheartening, because it's so needed. You know, I've been in hospital, my daughter was away at university, so I was home alone. I got discharged, I couldn't walk properly. My mum got diagnosed with leukemia, so she wasn't been able to give me her care and support the way she used to. So I felt really vulnerable. I was literally petrified to go home. And they said they'd try and get me a social worker, try and get me a commode, try and get me, you know, like something to put in the shower so I can sort of get in there. I came out and I was literally just a vulnerable person for like 2 days. A carer came and then said, oh, we don't have anything. I can't cook anything, you know, so they couldn't feed me. The commode came, but the delivery guy left it at the door. And at this point, I could barely walk properly. So I was really vulnerable. So I think there should be a lot more done in that regards, because I was actually really scared. So it's hard because I want, and I'm trying to, you know, express what we go through, what we need. However, it's very limiting to what people can do to help us, because it's like Linda said, it's such a small thing on this bigger scale of things, what's happening. So it gets kind of pushed to the side and ignored, and it can be very disheartening. And obviously, I just wish that things could be different, you know, and better, because we do need more help and more support.
It's not often that I'm lost for words, right? But I'm lost for words that a disorder, much like Linda, I understand it from, it's strange that I understand it from the medical perspective in terms of the biology, and the fact that sickle cell was one of the first mutations which was discovered. I think it was the very first one, and it's a point mutation. And we see all of these gene editing and so many other treatments. I would have thought, having been the first, you guys would be the first to receive the specialist treatment with all of the advances. So we have to ask the question about health inequity. We have to ask the question about why is it that, where are our lobbyists? So we need to, as a platform and as individuals who are listening, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Invisible Warrior is such a powerful platform and needs to be supported. We need to lobby so that, I'm not saying we don't want other Louisas, but we don't want other people to go through this kind of suffering, unnecessary suffering, because of a lack of investment. And I think we need to use, as a community, we need to use our voice, and educating ourselves within the community, I think is vitally important as well. We can't just expect other people to do it on our behalf. I'm not saying that that's what we're doing, but I'm saying that we do have to do more. Louisa, your story is just, I wish I had another 2 hours, because I say this, but I think there were so many things to unpack. So what I'm going to suggest to anybody who wants to know more, you have a website, yeah? And I know that you do, is it at least monthly? Am I right in saying?
Yeah,
around
monthly workshops, yeah.
Right. I'm going to encourage people to visit and go and listen in and educate yourself, and let's see if we can lobby Parliament to get more equity. Linda's just put the website in the chat, so please go to that and let's really work together to raise the profile, because I think in this day and age, I don't feel as a Black community, or as anyone who's suffering from this type of illness, that we shouldn't be able to move it to the next level and get the types of treatment and make advances. I'll be honest with you, this isn't about me, but I'm just showing my ignorance. I didn't realize that you had to pay for your medication, your prescriptions, because there's a chronic illness, and that's what it is. You can't change it.
No.
That shouldn't be the case. But I'm not gonna say any more on that. I'm just gonna say, Louisa, I normally ask this question at the end, which is, what advice would you give? But you've given quite a bit of advice. So I'm gonna say, what aspirations do you have for the future, for yourself and for the Invisible Warrior?
Oh, it's hard because I know it sounds weird, but I don't think too far ahead because of a sickle cell. It's a bit hard, so I just try to get through each day. But however, you know, like I would like things to change, you know, like, sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional, but you know, like I just would hope for a day where, you know, babies being born with sickle cell, you know, can get a better life, because it isn't nice, it isn't fair. And I think, you know, if I can make a change somehow, and I'm saying it very humbly, I'm not saying, you know, like, oh, you know, I'm some great, but I do this from the bottom of my heart, because I just remember being that little girl in the hospital bed. I remember being the young adult in the hospital bed, and being the adult now, trying to live a life with sickle cell. So I just want to make a positive change. I want to show that, you know, not all sickle cell patients, we're striving, we're trying, and we want some sort of a peaceful life, and I think we deserve that, you know, like it's just inhumane to think otherwise. So if anything, just if I could change one person's opinion, or a doctor to treat someone a little bit better, or a nurse, and also to inform, you know, young Black people to get tested, to know what your genotype is, so that we cannot have so many people suffering, you know, that's really important. Also, you know, mental health, you know, as a Black person, it's okay to go and speak to somebody. It's not weak. It doesn't mean, you know, something completely wrong. It's normal to get therapy, and it's okay. Yeah, and I just hope that, you know, we can get asked to do more things like this. And I'm very shy, but it's helped me. I'm working on that. So, and I'm so thankful for the team, because I'll be honest, like, if I didn't have the team supporting me, this wouldn't be able to grow, because with sickle cell, there's days when I can't do anything. I'm feeling very unwell. So without the other team members, I don't know how I would do it. So I thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to be able to do this.
They've got a President's Award for her work. I think the whole team needs a President's Award, because you're doing amazing things, you know, huge respect. And you know what, I'm here for you. On whatever platform I can big you up and to lend my support, then let's do that. We need to get this on. There's associations out there. Everybody does their little bit. Old West Indian saying is one quarter, full basket. Basically, it takes a little bit from everyone putting into the pot, and before you know it, that basket is full. But we have to put something in. So it's a carrion call. It's a call out for help, that we can build up what we have here and make it applicable, and actually get into Parliament and get these kinds of legislations changed. We've got to do something. Guys, you've got me emotional, right? And I just want to say a really, really big thank you. Really big thank you. All right. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Wayne.
I'm going to just share with everyone what we've got on for next week, but it's going to tough act to follow, right? Tough act to follow. Absolutely. So next week, we're going to be having Mimi Nwasu, who's a civil engineer, and she won the Rising Star Award for Civil Engineering in London in 2020. So she'll be coming and sharing her stories of belonging and how she feels and how that's helped her to find her sense of identity. If you've missed any of the other episodes, then please have a look at our YouTube channel, where we've got, I don't know now, I've lost count. We've got quite a few interviews which we've done, looking at people's sense of identity and belonging. A couple of the highlights. But you know what? none of this would happen if it wasn't for the willingness of people like Louisa and all of our other guests, and Christina and Linda, all of them coming and sharing their stories, sharing about how they have gained their sense of belonging. So just have a good weekend, and we will see you again next week for the Belonging series. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.